Well, Merry Christmas to one and all. So what you see here is my Christmas present from the Tube Depot. Inside this magical box is a guitar tube amplifier or valve amplifier kit, the Fender 5F1 Champ. And I'm going to put it together today. You guys can hang out if you want. So there's everything out of the box minus the instruction packet. We have the cabinet, the speaker, and 3 boxes of stuff. Let's go over to the bench and take a look at the instructions. So I think one of the highlights of this kit is the excellent manual they provide. In color, double-sided, chapterized, we got warnings, cautions, notes, disclaimers, little history of the Fender Tweed amp, recommend some of this over. We've got a recommended tool list. I like this. The following are really nice to have. Let's move this over some more. Soldering station, multimeter, variac, current limiting AC source, needle nose pliers, wire cutter, center punch, nut drivers, square, scratch all, heat shrink, deburring tool, fingernail polish. We have our parts inventory. And then we get started. Cabinet preparation. And it says you have to download a couple PDFs for drilling the holes in the cabinet. Installing the shielding tape. Circuit assembly. That's where we're going to start. Circuit assembly. So let's go get those parts we need. The boxes are unlabeled, so you're just going to have to go through them each. So here is our PCB. This, I'm guessing, will be, yeah. Those are our tubes, JJ's. In my opinion, JJ's aren't the highest quality tubes, but they'll do. Alright, let's see what's in this one. This one's the heaviest. I'm guessing this one has our transformers. Yeah. That would be our output transformer. And this will be our power transformer. Well, as this is the final box, I hope the components are in here. Oh yeah. There's all our components. There's our chassis, which we'll get to later. Alright, let's take a look at our parts. Shielding tape. 12AX7 tube socket. 0.22 microfarad. Like mica caps. Electrolytics. This is our 8-pin sockets, octal sockets, one for the 6L6 and the other for the 5Y3 rectifier. Soldering tabs. There's our faceted power light. There's the bulb. There's the chicken head knob. There's more of the bulb assembly. I'm going to separate that stuff. What I'm trying to get a hold of now are basically just the components. Standoffs for mounting the board. 1 watt metal oxide power resistor. Resistors, 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 resistors. This is excellently packaged. High temperature wiring. More resistors. Wiring. Hardware. We don't need any hardware yet. Resistors. Oh, bias trim pot. That's cool. Here's our potentiometer. You notice we have the 3 lugs here. We also have 2 here. So that will serve as our power switch as well. Switchcraft quality input jacks. Switchcraft speaker connector. Well, those are, yeah. There's our Switchcraft speaker jack. One of our filter caps, 500 volt, 22, probably 22 microfarad, not 22 farad. Yeah, 22 micro. Fuse, hardware, heat shrink tubing. Yep, black heat shrink. Strain relief, hardware, all hardware. All right. Look at the circuit board here. You notice they made provisions for both axial and radial capacitors. That's very nice. Very wide traces. Yeah. Ground planes. Very nice job. As you can see here, before we get started soldering, I separated out capacitors, resistors, potentiometer, wires. Call that nulling. It just helps keep things a little bit more organized. We're going to start with the 1.5K resistor. And what's next? Install two 68K resistors in positions 1 and 2. So I got to find our pair of 68Ks. 100K, 22K, 100K. Oh, those don't go there. 470, 22, 10, 100, 100. There we go. 68Ks. 2 of them. Like I said, they go into positions 1 and 2. And you can see here, these are marked. This is the V1 input. So this will be the input into the preamp, the 12AX7. These amplifiers have 2 inputs, a bright and a normal, or I would call them more along the lines of a high and a low. Because one of them has an extra 1 meg resistor on it. All right, let's get them soldered in. A little blue tack there, and keeps everything real nice in place. Notice how I remove the solder before the iron. It just helps you get nice mountain or Hershey Kiss shaped solder joints. Make sure those guys are all sitting like they're supposed to be, and they are, and then we'll trim them. All right, next up we have these two right here. These are our coupling resistors for the input tube, the 12AX7, two 100K resistors, 1/2 watt. They go right here, R4 and R5. We'll get them soldered in nicely. The soldering part of this is going to go relatively quickly. It's the finessing everything later on that takes time. Getting all the wires the right length, because you don't want any extra wire when you're dealing with these audio signals. Every millimeter of wire is a millimeter of antenna that you're adding, that the amplifier can use to pick up, you know, stray sounds that we don't want to hear. Okay, now we're going to install this 22K resistor here, and this goes into the feedback loop. What Leo Fender did was he took a lead or a byte or whatever you want to call it off of the signal going out to the speaker, and he fed it back into the amplifier, into the gain stage. And what that does is it cuts down on the gain a little bit. It gives you what's we would call, people that are into amplifiers would call, more headroom. You have a lot more play of the volume dial, or how loud you play the instrument, before the distortion sets in. And these can be adjusted. You can adjust the headroom. Some amps don't use a feedback loop, so there's a lot of different ways to do things. I'm going to install a 22K resistor here, or 220K resistor here in position R9. And this is going to the feedback adjust, it looks like. I'm taking my time and cutting off each lead as close to the pad as possible, so there's nothing, you know, scratch you or cut your fingers or anything along those lines. Now we're going to add another 1.5K resistor over here. Remember, the 12AX7 is a dual triode tube. It's actually two separate amplifier tubes in one package, which is really nice. It allows you to do some neat things. You know, you can have two gain stages, or if you put in two 12AX7s, you can have 3 gain stages and a phase inverter if you're running an AB class amp. This is a simple class A amp, which means that the amplifier part, in this case the power tube, the 6L6 or 6V6, I'm not sure which one this is using, is amplifying through 100% of the sine wave. I have a playlist talking about the different amplifier types if you're interested in learning about stuff like that. All right, now we're moving on to the cathode bias for the power tube, and we're going to move up to a much larger 3-watt resistor. This is a 470 ohm. And to me, that seems like that might be just a little bit small, like half of what I would normally want. I would think a 1K, but hey, I didn't design this, so we'll go with what they have, and we'll measure the bias, and if it's not right, we can always swap it out. That's the beauty of building your own stuff. You know, you take the bass from the genius Leo Fender, and then you take the expertise of the people who have serviced them and modified them over the years. And then you can add your own mods into that as well. You know, just really go a long way. Well, this is a neat little part of the circuit here. This is where our B+, the high voltage, comes in. And then we're going to create a resistor voltage divider here with a 10K and a 22K to drop the voltage as it goes across. So let's start with the 10K, and you'll notice these are some big dogs. These are some 2-watt resistors. They mean business. Like that, and then we'll put in our 22K right next to it. Now, I'll show you a little trick that they don't mention in the manual, but I've built a few amps, and I've learned a couple things. So what you want to do is get yourself a piece of paper. And just kind of wedge it in there like that so that we get our resistors just a little bit of space off the PC board. You know, we're going to do it with both of them, because these resistors are going to generate some heat. And what we want to do is we want to keep that heat from scorching the PCB. So this little trick will work pretty well for that. I got so much glare here, I can hardly tell what I'm doing. Doing it by feel. Yeah, see, now we got our resistors spaced off the board a little bit. And again, like I said, that just helps dissipate some of the heat. Is it a huge advantage? No. Will the amp burn up without it? Probably not. I mean, they've been making these amps for a lot of years. So why should you do it? Well, who says you should? I'm just saying I did it. So we're coming back over to the left side of the board. We've got all of our resistors installed on the board. And we're going to be back over to the first stage preamp. And this is going to be its cathode bypass resistor. This is a 22 microfarad, which I've hopefully bent correctly. These are electrolytic, so yep, they are polarized, and you can see the little arrow pointing towards ground. If you put them in backwards, it won't be nice. What will happen is they will heat up. The electrolyte, the fluid inside them, will boil. It will start outgassing. The capacitor will swell. Eventually, the pressure will exceed what that thin little, probably aluminum casing can handle. And then it should go bang. Remember me saying that 12AX7, it's basically two separate amplifiers in one tube. So we put that 22 microfarad there. We're going to put one over here, which is for the other, that's how we call it, you know, V2, I guess. You want to make sure I've aligned my arrows with ground going in the proper direction. Because if you don't, all you're going to get in your stocking is a bang and a really nasty smell. So I hope you guys are all having a lovely Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate. But I hope you're enjoying this time of year and, you know, spending it with your families and just being happy to be alive. All right, we talked about the negative feedback earlier. We're going to use this little potentiometer to adjust it. And again, what this is doing is it is adjusting at what volume the amp is going to start breaking up. And by breaking up, we mean the overtones and the distortion that is, you know, part and parcel of blues and rock, and that sound, that rock and roll sound, that's called the breakup. And the sweetest breakup is right at the point where it starts happening, because what happens is you start getting harmonics and overtones before it really just completely fuzzes out. All right, now we are going to install our coupling capacitors, which are 0.22 microfarad, and they go here into C1 and C2. And that's these guys right here. Just make sure. 0.22 UFD. Yep. And they also match the picture. They're the brown mica caps. Now remember, capacitors in AC kind of behave as filters. So by doing a capacitor and a resistor, what you're ending up seeing is a selective audio filter. Now you could change these, you could mess around with these values and come up with something else. Different frequencies will be blocked, different frequencies will be passed. But you know what? When Leo Fender designed this in the late 40s, he spent a lot of time doing just that, and he don't need me to second guess him. Oh, excuse me. We got our coupling capacitors in there. Trim them up. And I think we're ready to move on to the filter capacitors. The big daddies. The source of most of your noise in an amplifier. So now we're going to put in the filter capacitors. There's 3 of them. And the values we will be using are 22 microfarad at 450 volts, 10 microfarad at 450 volts, and again 10 at 450. You'll notice here it says the asterisk denotes original value. It used 2 8s and a 16. Why did they change it? Well, this probably provides more of the filtering out the noise and the hum and all that kind of stuff. So we have our 450 volt 10 microfarad capacitors plus ground. We definitely want to get them in there like this with the arrow pointing towards ground. What's also nice is if you can arrange them so that you can read the values. See how you can see that right from there? That generally works out pretty good. Every single component, every single value will make a difference in how the amplifier performs and how it works. But these capacitors here are incredibly important. So you want to take your time, make sure you have everything flowing in the proper directions. Yep, looks good. And while I do have a little bit of experience in building vacuum tube amplifiers, this Tube Depot kit just has the most excellent manual. So I'm just looking here to make sure that my capacitors, you can see the dent there, look like they're showing them on the board. And they are. So that tells me I am doing it properly. Here's our last one, the 22 microfarad 500 volt. And we'll do the same thing. We'll make sure that it's readable. Looks good so far. That huge ground plane was soaking up quite a bit of heat there. And that, my friends, ends the component part of the board. Next, we move on to the wiring. And you can see all that down there. All right, now we are on the wiring part of the instructions. 5.2, wiring the board. Strip back the insulation from the end of the black wire 1/8 of an inch, tin the exposed end, insert it into the pad G1A and solder. Measure and cut this wire to a length of 3 inches from the pad. All right. So there is G1A. Get our strippers here to adjust them. They're new, so they're a little tight. see. That should give us close to what we're looking for. No, it needs to go back more. There we go. Not bad. It's more than an eighth. It's about a 1/4 inch, but I'm cool with that. So that goes into G1A. Like so. And then we'll hold her down here. Get it soldered in. And then we are supposed to cut it. Move up here so you guys can see better. 3 inches from the end of the board. So right about there. Like so. Now we do that for G2A and G2B. So I had a couple more. You didn't have to watch me do that. We're now on the G2A and G2B, G3A. Okay, and this one needs to be 4 inches long. They do not give you much room to play around down in there, and that's a good thing. Tighter joint, everything's better that way. Okay, now the difference on this one is we're supposed to cut this one to 4 inches. All right, so we're on to the final grounding wire, which was a G6A, and we're back to our 3-inch length. So there we have all of our grounds, which will be going to the chassis. And you may ask, well, what about these other holes? Well, we might get to them later, or as you notice here, they're all in the same ground plane. So they might just be kind of redundant. All right, so next we need to go to the red wires, which are our B+ voltage. Strip back the insulation. Strip back the insulation from the end of the red wire, 1/8 inch. Insert the pad labeled D and solder. So we have to do that for D, E, and M. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. You don't need to watch that, do you? So here's the circuit board completed. We have all of our components in, going from the first stage of the 12XA7 to the second stage to the power tube, our filter capacitors. The red wires represent our high voltage coming in. The yellow wires are signal wires. The black wires are ground, and these yellow wires up here are signal grounds. So we have all of our grounds on this side of the board. We have all of our positives on this side. Signals are flowing in that direction. All right, I just realized we're almost 40 minutes into this. And I'd say we're about a third of the way in. So I'm going to end this video here. I don't want to keep you forever. Next video, we'll do the chassis and hopefully get it in the cabinet, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. So I want to thank you guys for watching, hanging out with me. I'll put a link to Tube Depot down below where you can check these things out. Almost nobody has tube amp kits in stock right now. I got so lucky. When I look at them all the time because I keep wanting to buy one. Nobody has them in stock, and this is the only one they had in stock. So they're saying after Christmas they're going to have more in stock. This one's $549. I think with tax I paid $5.99 for this, and should be a really nice sounding amp. All right, so that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. Feel free to comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe. Big thanks to all the patrons, and a big thanks to you for watching. That's it. I'm out. Peace.